Clearwater was a place where nights felt longer than days. A town of shadows, frozen rivers, and neon signs that buzzed as if reluctant to fight the dark. Most evenings passed without event, just Caleb Mason on his steady rounds, a familiar figure to the silence. But on this winter night, silence carried something else, something raw enough to pierce through layers of cold. It was the sound no lawman ever forgets, a child crying. Deputy Caleb Mason had walked countless midnights, his boots crunching across icy gravel, breath steaming white in the freezing air. He was 36, broad-shouldered, ash-blonde hair cropped short, storm-gray eyes dulled but steady. His navy patrol jacket was zipped high to the collar, badge glinting faintly in the weak glow of street lamps. He had once walked deserts overseas as military police, 10 years trading with sandstorms and gunfire, and when he came back, he promised himself he would guard small towns like this with the same fire. For Caleb, peace wasn't just silence. Peace was making sure the innocent could sleep through the night. That promise cracked when he heard it. A whimper, thin, fragile, too human to be the wind. He stopped in his tracks, tilted his head, and killed the beam of his flashlight. For a moment, the only sound was the flap of half-frozen tarps at the edge of Clearwater's flea market. And then it came again, a sob, muffled, breathless, trembling. The flea market during the day was a patchwork of canvas and chatter, but at midnight it was nothing but bones. Aluminum frames hunched like skeletons, tables leaning against one another, tarps stiff with frost. A mist hung low, clinging to storefronts, making the place feel less like a market and more like a graveyard of forgotten things. Caleb stepped between two shuttered stalls, his hand brushing instinctively near his belt, but not drawing his weapon. Something told him this wasn't danger in the usual sense. It was something more delicate, and maybe more dangerous in its own way. And then he saw her, a small figure, curled against the cracked brick wall of a building whose paint had long peeled away. She couldn't have been more than 9, though her body looked thinner, smaller, starved of warmth and safety. Her arms were wrapped around a dog. No, not just a dog. A German shepherd, his ribs showing sharp beneath his coat, his entire body trembling. She clung to him like he was the last solid thing left in the world. Her clothes told the story before her lips did. A gray coat, thin and torn at the hem, jeans soaked at the knees, clinging to scraped, bruised skin. On her feet, shoes that didn't match, one sneaker, one torn slipper with the toe blown open. And her face, when she lifted her head at the crunch of Caleb's boots, his chest tightened. Tangled dark hair half covered her pale cheeks, but not enough to hide the marks. Bruises bloomed beneath hazel eyes. A thin cut marked her nose, and her lip was split and caked with dried blood. Her gaze wasn't startled. It was weary, like she had expected someone to come, but feared what that someone might bring. The dog was no less broken. Young, maybe 2 years old, but already scarred by more than age. His fur was matted, dark ash and sable, with a patch rubbed raw on his neck. A deep rope burn still oozed faintly beneath a frayed collar. One hind leg was tucked tight, trembling from injury. Yet even like this, he positioned his body between the girl and the stranger who had found them. His low growl rumbled, lips peeling back just enough to warn. Caleb lowered himself slowly, crouching so his size wouldn't frighten either of them. His voice came steady, soft, careful. "Hey there," he said, warmth threading every word. "It's okay. You're safe now." The shepherd bristled, growling low, but Caleb kept his hands raised, empty. "Easy, big guy. I'm not here to hurt anyone. Not you, not her." His eyes shifted back to the girl. "Are you hurt? Can you talk to me?" She flinched at the sound, her thin shoulders shuddering. Then she nodded, just once. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Caleb softened his tone even more. "My name's Caleb. I work for the sheriff's office. I was just on patrol when I heard you. You don't have to say anything yet. I just want to make sure you're okay." Slowly, he unzipped his patrol jacket. Beneath it, his thick sweater kept him warm enough. He held the heavy jacket out toward her. "You look cold. Take this. It'll help." The girl hesitated, shrinking further into the shepherd's fur. For a moment, Caleb thought she might refuse. Then the dog leaned forward, sniffed the coat, gave a faint whine, and nudged her hand with his nose. That was enough. Her trembling fingers reached forward, pulling the jacket around her small body, then wrapping the extra fabric over the shepherd's shaking frame as well. That's when Caleb noticed her wrists. Bruises there, clear as day, shaped like fingers that had gripped too hard. Recent. His jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Her reply was a whisper, nearly lost in the wind. "Lily." "Hi, Lily." He gave her a faint smile, one he hoped looked reassuring instead of pitying. That's a beautiful name. His gaze shifted to the shepherd, who hadn't stopped watching him. And your friend here? Her arms tightened around the dog's thick neck. Ranger, she whispered again. Ranger, Caleb repeated, nodding. That's a strong name for a brave dog. He tapped the mic on his shoulder and spoke into it. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I've got a female child, approximately 9 years old, found behind the flea market at 9th and Main. She's cold, bruised, malnourished. Accompanying her is a German shepherd with a visible neck injury. Request immediate medical and child services. Over. The radio hissed, then came the dispatcher's reply. Copy that, Unit 4. Help is on the way. Caleb clipped the mic back into place and looked at the girl again. Her eyes weren't on him. They flicked nervously to the alley's edge, to the shadows, as though she expected someone, or something, to step out. Her trembling deepened, and Caleb knew it wasn't the cold this time. It was fear. Hey, he said softly, leaning a little closer, careful not to invade the small circle of safety she and Ranger had built. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you. I promise, but she didn't answer. Instead, she buried her face in Ranger's fur. The shepherd, despite his limp, curled tighter around her, shielding her as best he could. Caleb noticed then, on the inside of her left hand, a mark. A burn scar, faint, almost healed, but deliberate. Not an accident. Someone had done this. His gaze shifted back to Ranger's neck. Rope burn, deep, old pain stacked on new. None of this was chance. This was cruelty repeated. He swallowed hard and steadied himself. Then he lowered onto one knee beside them, keeping distance but offering presence. He didn't push, didn't reach, didn't crowd. He simply let the space around them feel less empty. His voice came again, no louder than a whisper. You did the right thing by running. And I swear to you, Lily, no one is ever going to hurt you again. Beyond the alley, the night stretched cold and quiet. But a few blocks away, the neon buzz of the old 24-hour diner cut through the stillness. Its chrome and tile walls glowed faintly against the dark, a beacon of warmth. Inside, it smelled of coffee and fried eggs, and the hum of a jukebox filled the silence. Caleb guided Lily and Ranger there with careful steps. The bell above the door jingled softly as they entered, drawing the gaze of a trucker half dozing in a booth and an elderly man hunched over his coffee. Behind the counter stood Norma, the night waitress, her wiry frame and silver-streaked hair unmistakable. She didn't ask questions when her eyes landed on the child wrapped in an oversized patrol jacket, clinging to a battered shepherd. Instead, she gave Caleb a knowing nod and pointed toward the booth near the heater. Caleb led Lily and Ranger over. The dog jumped up first, then pressed himself against Lily's side, head resting heavy on her lap. She curled into him, half swallowed by Caleb's jacket. Sliding into the opposite seat, Caleb tugged off his gloves and exhaled. Norma shuffled over, poured him coffee without a word, and asked in her raspy voice, "Cocoa for the girl?" "Yeah," Caleb murmured, glancing at Lily. "Extra marshmallows if you've got them." Norma's eyes softened as she looked at the girl who hadn't lifted her head once. "Coming right up," she said, and as the warmth settled into the booth, Lily's trembling slowed. Her hands, still pink and raw, curled into Rers's fur. Caleb waited. He didn't push her, just sat, watching the steam rise from his coffee, giving her time. Eventually, Lily's voice emerged, a whisper dry and shaky. "My mom died last week. Caleb met Heraya's. I'm so sorry. They said she took sleeping pills, that she left a note, but I didn't see one. No one showed it to me." Lily bit her lip. Mark said she was depressed. But she wasn't, not like that. She was scared and she wouldn't have left Ranger. Never. "Mark?" Caleb asked gently. "My stepdad, Mark Dawson." Her hands tightened on Ariar's fur. "He came after my dad died. Moved in with us a year later." Norma returned and set down the cocoa, steam swirling over the rim of the chipped blue mug. Lily stared at it for a second, then slowly picked it up with both hands. Her fingers shook slightly, but she took a careful sip. "He drinks a lot," she said, eyes fixed on the cup. "When he drinks, he yells. Sometimes at me, sometimes at Mom. But when she wasn't around, it was worse." Caleb pulled a small notepad from his coat pocket. He didn't open it. Just let it rest on the table. "Can you tell me what happened?" "As much or as little as you want." Lily looked up, her eyes rimmed red. "He didn't like Ranger. Said he was a waste of food. Said he should have been put down after my dad died. But Mom wouldn't let him. Ranger's mine. My dad gave him to me for my 7th birthday. Said he'd keep me safe." Ranger thumped his tail softly against the vinyl seat. "He tried to lock him in the basement once for barking. Didn't feed him for 2 days. Sneaked him food when I could. After Mom died, he said if I didn't do what he told me, Ranger would disappear too." Her lip trembled, so I ran. Caleb exhaled slowly. He opened his notepad now, quietly writing. Mark Dawson, potential suspect. Allegations, abuse, neglect. Check death records for wife, overdose, verify cause. Note, child claims. No suicide note shown. Was your mom seeing anyone? Friends? People she talked to about this? Lily shook her head. She stopped talking to people after Mark moved in. He didn't like visitors. Not even the neighbor. She lives across the hall. Miss Helen. She's old, but she smiles at me sometimes. When Mark isn't watching, Caleb nodded again, underlining Helen. Neighbor. Interview pending. What about the pills? Did you see them? I saw the bottle after. It had her name on it, but she hated pills. She used tea for everything. Chamomile, peppermint, she said. Chemicals made her stomach twist. A red flag in Caleb's mind unfurled immediately. He tapped the back of his pin against the table. Ranger stirred beside Lily, letting out a faint, exhausted huff. Caleb glanced down and noticed the way the dog kept shifting his weight, favoring his right hind leg. Ranger got hurt? He asked. Lily nodded. Last week, Mark kicked him down the back steps, said he was in the way. I tried to help him, but her voice faded into silence. Caleb clenched his jaw, then carefully scribbled. Injury to animal, back leg, possible vet consult, evidence of physical abuse. He looked up. Lily, you did the right thing, leaving, getting Ranger out. You're both safe now. She didn't respond right away, just sipped her cocoa. Then quietly she said, I think Mark killed my mom. The booth fell into stillness. I think she found something he washing. Lily's brow furrowed. There were papers. She kept them in a shoebox under her bed. She never told me what they were, but she started acting scared. Like she knew something she shouldn't. Caleb felt the hair on his arms rise. Do you know what happened to the box? Lily shook her head. It was gone the day she died. So was her journal and her phone. He wrote fast now. Shoebox missing. Journal plus phone missing. Motive cover-up. I saw him talking to a man I didn't know in the backyard. They shook hands. Then Mark gave him something in a brown envelope. The man drove off in a gray truck. Caleb's eyes sharpened. Do you remember anything about the truck? License plate? Stickers? Lily paused, thinking. There was a dent on the back left side, and it had snow chains. A commercial vehicle, maybe. Delivery contractor. Then it hit him. Weeks ago, there had been a quiet investigation into counterfeit prescription labels. Nothing stuck. No arrest, no evidence. Could this be the missing link? Ranger gave a soft whine and pressed his head into Lily's chest. She hugged him tightly. Caleb stood, tucked away his notes, and placed a few bills on the table. Come on, he said gently. Let's get you somewhere safe. The small, dimly lit office in the back of Clearwater's police substation still carried the scent of black coffee and winter wet coats. Outside, snow tapped gently against the windows like a lullaby, muffled by the thick glass. Caleb Mason sat across from Lily Thompson, who now rested on a cushioned bench under a plaid blanket. Ranger lay curled beside her, his ears alert, but his eyes growing heavier with each passing minute. Mara Jenkins, the on-call medic, had already come and gone. A middle-aged woman with a tight silver bun and a voice that could hush chaos. Mara had gently cleaned the bruises on Lily's arms, confirmed the girl had at least one cracked rib, and applied ointment to the raw lines across Rare's neck. Her hands were efficient but warm. She didn't speak much, but the way she looked at Lily made the child exhale in tiny shudders of comfort. Now, in the quiet after the chaos, Caleb sipped from his mug and offered a cookie across the table. I know you've told me a lot already, Lily, he said, keeping his tone as soft as the snow outside. But you mentioned earlier that Ranger belonged to your dad. I'd like to know more about him, your real dad. Lily's small hands gripped the cookie tightly. Her eyes flicked toward the flickering desk lamp, not meeting Caleb's. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. My dad's name was Daniel Thompson. He was a firefighter. Caleb straightened slightly, silently absorbing the detail. He nodded for her to continue. He always smelled like smoke and peppermint gum, she said with a faint, broken smile. He used to say the gum kept him from falling asleep at the wheel on long shifts. He'd come home tired, but he'd never forget to read me a story. Every single night she paused, then rubbed Rear's ears. The dog gave a low, content grunt. He brought Ranger home when I turned 6. Said, every girl needs a brave knight. He called Ranger the knight with 4 paws. Caleb smiled, but let her keep going. One night about a year ago he didn't come home, she said, voice turning quiet again. They said it was a warehouse fire. Some chemicals exploded. They told Mom it was quick that he didn't suffer. Other fingers gripped the edge of her blanket. I remember hearing Mom cry behind the bathroom door. She said it didn't feel like an accident. Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest, and then she hesitated, glancing up as if seeking permission. Caleb gave a slow nod. Then Mark came. Just a few weeks later, she said the name like it tasted sour in her mouth. He moved in fast. I didn't understand it at first. Mom said we needed help, but it never felt right. He hated Ranger. Said dogs didn't belong inside. One day he locked him in the basement. Ranger scratched at the walls for hours. Ranger let out a quiet whimper as if recalling the moment. But then one night I heard Mark shouting loud, angry. I don't remember what started it, but I screamed and Ranger. He broke the lock. He came crashing up the stairs like a storm and put himself between us. Caleb watched the dog, now sleeping, but still tucked against Lily like a second shadow. He saved me, Lily said, tears threatening again. Even when Mark threw things at him, he didn't leave me. Caleb felt his throat tighten. He's a good dog, he said softly. He's my last piece of dad, she whispered. The only one left. For a long moment, silence settled like fresh snowfall. Caleb finally cleared his throat. Lily, would it be all right if I take a small sample of Rare's fur? Just to check for anything unusual, chemicals, drugs, anything that could help us understand what he's been through. She looked hesitant, then nodded. Okay, just don't hurt him. I won't, Caleb promised. He rose, retrieved a sterile swab kit from the evidence drawer, and gently brushed a few strands of fur from behind Ariar's neck. The dog stirred but didn't flinch, his body trusting. As he sealed the bag, Caleb glanced at Lily, who was now leaning against Rare's side, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her head bobbed once, twice, and then stilled, finally asleep. Caleb dimmed the light and stepped into the hallway. Outside, the snow was still falling, but inside this station, a fragile warmth had settled. And in that quiet, Caleb Mason felt a weight settle on his shoulders. Not just the badge, but the growing certainty that whatever darkness had wrapped itself around this little girl's life, it was about to be brought into the light. The morning sun was just beginning to stretch its weak golden fingers over clear water. But Caleb Mason was already moving through the quieter streets. The frost still clung to mailboxes and window panes, and his breath puffed visibly in the air as he parked his cruiser a block away from Lily's old house. He wasn't in uniform. Dressed in a worn olive-green parka and jeans, Caleb moved on foot under the guise of a neighborhood check. He had informed dispatch he was making early morning rounds, but this wasn't about routine patrol. His instincts, sharpened by years in military police and further honed in the quiet suspicion of Clearwater's darker corners, told him there was more to Mark Dawson than Lily had the words to explain. Ranger trotted beside him, ears perked, gait alert. The dog had insisted on coming, pacing in Caleb's kitchen until he relented. Now, with Lily safely asleep at the substation under the care of Officer Natalie Brooks, an affable woman in early 40s with kind eyes and a reputation for baking cookies for every kid she met, Caleb focused on the task ahead. The house was older than it looked. Faded white paneling, a slanted porch, and cracked window pane spoke of years of neglect. A blue tarp flapped from the roof like a half-forgotten bandage. Mark's truck wasn't in the driveway, which gave Caleb the time he needed. As he approached from the alleyway, Ranger paused. The dog's nose twitched as he sniffed the air, then veered left toward the backyard gate. Caleb followed there. Under the rickety wooden overhang, muddy boot prints trailed toward the back door. Not fresh, but not old either. Caleb crouched down. The tread was deep, heavier on one side. He scanned the area. The doorknob bore faint scratches around the lock, as if someone had entered in haste or secrecy. But that wasn't what caught his attention. To the left, behind a crooked lattice fence, a small storage shed stood half hidden by leafless shrubs. It had a rusted metal padlock and no visible ventilation. Ranger suddenly growled a low, short sound. His body leaned toward a flower pot near the side of the shed. Caleb's brows furrowed. What is it, boy? Ranger nosed the pot, then let out a single sharp bark. Caleb reached behind it and found a small greasy key taped to the bottom of the pot. His heartbeat quickened. Good work. He glanced around once more to ensure the coast was clear, then fit the key into the padlock. It clicked open with a metallic cough. The shed door creaked on old hinges. Inside, the stench hit first chemical metallic bitter. The small space was packed floor to ceiling with unlabeled cardboard boxes, some partially torn, revealing stacks of pill bottles and syringes sealed in plastic. A half-open duffel bag near the corner contained what looked like forged medical labels and blank prescription slips. Caleb took a step back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just personal use. This was a distribution point. Carefully, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his department-issued phone. No flash, just low light mode. He took photos of the labels, the bag, the layout. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small audio recorder, an old habit from his days in military intel. Timestamp 7:12 a.m., he whispered. Clearwater, suspect residence. Evidence of large-scale storage and possible trafficking of controlled substances. No suspects on site. Witness. K9 Unit Ranger gave him a look, tail thumping once. Caleb snapped one last shot of a box with an emblem he didn't recognize. A stylized red serpent wrapping a vial, unmarked but clearly significant. Then, with practiced ease, he closed the shed and relocked it. They couldn't move too quickly. Not without a proper warrant, and not if they wanted this cassette to stick. Back in the alleyway, Caleb knelt beside Ranger. "We just cracked something wide open," he murmured. The dog leaned forward and nudged his cheek gently. "I'm going to need you for this," Caleb added, "and we're not letting Lily down." He took one last look at the house, then slipped away through the alley. Footsteps silent on the frosted ground. Mark Dawson slammed the door of his Oldford pickup so hard the window rattled in its frame. His boots crunched against gravel and frozen mud as he stalked toward the now empty house. The silence stung worse than the cold. "Lie!" he bellowed into the hallway, voice rough from whiskey and sleepless nights. "Get your damn mud out here." No answer, just the soft creak of the ceiling fan turning slowly above. His eyes narrowed. She was gone, and so was that cursed German shepherd. Mark's thick neck turned red as he kicked over a basket near the entryway. His breath fogged up the window as he peered out into the backyard. No footprints, nothing obvious. But something in his gut told him someone had helped her, and he already had a good guess who. A few blocks across town, Caleb Mason parked outside a pale yellow bungalow tucked between two larger buildings. A small mailbox read, "Julie Parker, LCSW." Julie opened the door just as Caleb stepped onto the porch. She was in her early 50s, tall and lean, with short silver hair swept behind her ears. There was a quiet confidence in her movements, like someone who had seen too much but refused to be hardened by it. She wore a cardigan with stitched daisies over Anavy blouse and reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck. "You're early?" She smiled gently. "But I'm glad." "She's been awake since 5. She sleep okay?" Caleb asked as he stepped in. Julie nodded, closing the door softly behind them. "Sless at first?" She cried in her sleep. But Ranger, he didn't move from that hallway all night like a soldier on watch. In the softly lit living room, Lily sat curled up in a fleece blanket on the couch, a book resting unopened in her lap. Her bruises were beginning to fade to green and yellow patches along her arms and neck, but her eyes still held that haunted look. Ranger lay across the entrance to the hallway, his gray-black coat like a shadow, stretched between her and the world. His ears perked slightly as Caleb entered, then lowered again in relaxed recognition. "Hi, Officer Caleb," Lily said softly. "Morning, Lily," he replied, crouching down beside her. "Julie, treating you all right?" "She made me pancakes," Lily whispered with the barest smile. Julie stepped into the kitchen, giving them space. Caleb sat on the edge of the coffee table. "I wanted to ask you a favor. You remember those papers your mom used to keep? Did she ever mention her doctor's name?" Lily thought for a moment. "Dr. Halpern. He had a beard and always wore funny socks. Mommy said he helped deliver me." Caleb nodded. "You're doing great, Lily. I'm proud of you." From the kitchen, Julie reappeared holding a thin folder. "You might want to see this," she said, handing it over. Caleb opened the file slowly. Inside were several scanned medical records Julie had requested that morning, along with a copy of the official death certificate. He skimmed the listed physician's name. "Dr. Eugene Madsen." "That's not the same man," Caleb muttered. Julie crossed her arms. "Nope. And Madsen lost his license 6 years ago in a Medicaid fraud case. He's not allowed to legally certify death causes anymore. This signature shouldn't even be valid." Caleb exhaled. "So, someone pulled strings to process it anyway?" Julie nodded. "Or paid someone off." Ranger suddenly growled a low warning sound. Both adults turned quickly, but it wasn't a threat, just a shadow moving outside. A mail carrier walking past with a bundle of flyers. Still, Ranger remained seated, eyes fixed on the door, muscles taut. "He hasn't let his guard down once," Julie said. "He even patrols the perimeter. I caught him last night making rounds through the house." Lily reached out and touched RER's fur. "He's always done that. Even when I was sick, he'd stay beside the bed." Caleb looked between them, then lowered his voice. "Lily, if I promise to keep you safe, would you help me with something else?" She looked up. "There might be something in your mom's old things that can help us figure out what really happened. Like notes, journals, anything she hid. You think you could remember where she kept them?" Lily's brow furrowed. "Maybe in the easing room. She had a box behind her fabrics." Caleb wrote it down. Just then, Julie's landline rang from the other room. She excused herself, leaving Caleb and Lily alone. Ranger scooted closer, resting his head gently on Lily's knee. "Don't leave me, Ranger," she whispered into his ear. "Please don't leave me too." The dog didn't move, just closed his eyes and let out a low, steady breath, as if to say, "I'm here. I always will be." The moon hung low over clear water, casting a pale sheen on the warehouses along the old riverside docks. The cold night air carried the sharp scent of rust and stagnant water. Officer Caleb Mason stood beside his unmarked cruiser, collar pulled high, storm-gray eyes scanning the darkness ahead. His breath came in clouds. Beside him, Ranger, the 2-year-old gray and black German shepherd, sat alert, ears erect, eyes glinting under the faint glow of the lamppost behind them. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. This was a coordinated takedown. Earlier that evening, Lily had been left under protective custody at a safe house with Julie Parker, the social worker. Ranger, however, had barked and scratched at the door relentlessly when Caleb left until the officer finally gave in. It seemed the dog knew something. There was something raw in Rares' instincts that couldn't be taught, a vigilance molded from trauma, sharpened by love. Now they waited at the edge of the trap. Inside the warehouse district, Detective Harris, a broad-shouldered black man in his 40s, known for his steady nerves and dry wit, was setting up surveillance with 2 younger officers, Ramirez and Connor. The plan was simple. Bait Mark Dawson into retrieving one of his hidden shipments. The feds had taken too long. Caleb wasn't going to let this man vanish into the night again. Ranger growled softly. Caleb knelt down beside him. "You smell something?" The shepherd's nose twitched. Without waiting, he tugged gently at the leash, leading Caleb toward a nearby alley. It was dark, thick with old cardboard boxes and broken pallets. Caleb moved silently behind him, one hand near his holster, and then they found it. A side door recently forced open. Caleb clicked on his flashlight and aimed it inside. Dust danced in the beam. Rows of crates lined the corridor. Some were sealed, others half open, revealing unmarked white bottles and tightly wrapped bundles of cash. The air ryer of cheap chemicals and ink. It was the break they needed. Caleb whispered into his radio. "We've got visual confirmation. Evidence on site. Proceed to intercept. Dawson might be inbound." Back outside, headlights appeared at the far end of the docks. A black SUV rolled in slow and silent, its engine barely audible. Caleb ducked behind a stack of wooden pallets, watching as the vehicle stopped just short of the warehouse entrance. The driver's door creaked open. Mark Dawson stepped out. He looked thinner than the photos from his file. A man in his early 40s with slicked back, dark blonde hair, a week's worth of stubble, and eyes that darted like he never slept peacefully. He wore a worn leather jacket and fingerless gloves, and his hand gripped a crowbar. He moved fast, heading to the back of the warehouse. Ranger gave a low whine and tugged forward. Caleb gave the signal. They followed. Just as Mark entered, Caleb hissed into his radio. "Move in now." But something went wrong. A second man, someone they hadn't expected, stepped out from behind one of the vans and lunged at Caleb with a lead pipe. Everything happened in a blur. The pipe arced through the air. Caleb barely turned, but Ranger launched forward with a snarl, his body colliding with the attacker midair. The man fell hard onto the pavement, groaning in pain as the Ranger growled inches from his throat. Caleb kicked the weapon away and cuffed him. "You picked the wrong alley, buddy." From the warehouse came a sharp crash. Inside, Mark had realized the trap. Heron toward the back door, only to find it blocked by 2 officers and a wall of crates. He turned to flee, but Ranger was already there. The shepherd barked furiously, blocking the narrow exit. Mark hesitated, swinging his crowbar in panic. Ranger didn't flinch. One step forward from Mark, and the shepherd leapt again, knocking the weapon from his hand with his jaws and driving the man backward into a stack of boxes. Mark fell. By the time he hit the ground, Caleb was there, cuffs ready. "Mark Dawson," Caleb said firmly, breath misting in the cold air. "You're under arrest for possession and distribution of counterfeit pharmaceuticals, assault and endangerment of a minor." Mark didn't say a word. He just stared at Ranger, the dog whose life he had tried to break, who now stood over him like judgment made flesh. The other officers arrived moments later. As they secured the perimeter, Ramirez gave Caleb a look of respect. "That dog's something else." Caleb ruffled Ranger's fur, heart pounding with adrenaline. "He's more than something. He's justice." As they walked back to the cruiser, Caleb looked up at the night sky. Snow had begun to fall, soft and silent. The air felt lighter. Back at the station, he would call Julie and Lily. He knew what this meant. The net had closed, and Ranger, the broken, wounded shepherd, had become the blade that ended the nightmare. The gray morning light broke over clear water, soft and cold, casting long shadows across the snow-covered parking lot outside the precinct. Inside the station, Caleb Mason sat at his desk. Files spread across the surface like scattered pieces of a broken mirror. Ranger lay curled at his feet, ears twitching but calm for once. The arrest of Mark Dawson had triggered a wave of action. His phone and laptop, both seized at the time of his capture, were now gold mines of evidence. Detective Harris leaned over Caleb's shoulder, his brow furrowed as he read through the decrypted messages. "There it is," Harris muttered, pointing at a time-stamped email. 3 weeks before her death, he messaged someone named RG confirming the sleeping pills plan and access to the life insurance policy. Caleb's jaw tightened. And here, he said, clicking open a folder filled with financial records, are the wire transfers tied to dummy pharmaceutical companies. He was laundering drug money through shell charities. The fire that killed Lily's father was just the beginning. Julie Parker stepped in, her winter coat still dusted with snow. The 32-year-old caseworker had a lean build, dark curls pulled back into a low bun, and eyes that carried a quiet fire. She laid a manila folder on the desk. This came from the Department of Insurance. Mark changed the beneficiary of Monica Thompson's policy a month before her death. Forged signature. Ranger gave a low, almost human growl. Caleb glanced down, resting a hand on the shepherd's head. He knew exactly what he was doing, Julie said softly. He was getting rid of the only person who knew how deep he was in this. They compiled everything. Text messages, financial records, shipping manifests, even a voice memo Mark had recorded, bragging about his clean getaway after Monica's death. That memo would now be used in court to expose the truth. Later that afternoon, they visited the juvenile court office. Lily had been moved temporarily to Sunridge Haven, a warm and secure group home on the east side of Clearwater for children in protective custody. The building looked like a large country house with pine trees surrounding its fences and soft music drifting through its windows. Caleb and Julie found Lily in the common room, sitting cross-legged on a couch with a thick knitted blanket around her shoulders. She was coloring in a worn-out notebook, her head down. Ranger was beside her, resting his chin on her lap. Other children watched cartoons nearby, but Ranger stayed fixed like a sentinel. Lily looked up as Caleb approached, her brown eyes shining with cautious hope. "Did they find out what happened to Mom?" she asked quietly. Caleb sat beside her. "Yes, and you were right, Lily. Your mother didn't choose to leave you." Mark heard her so no one would know about the bad things he was doing. Lily clutched the dog's fur tighter. "She tried to tell me, but I didn't understand." Julie knelt in front of her, placing a gentle hand on her knee. "You were brave, sweetheart. You spoke up when no one else would. Because of you, other kids will be safe now too." Ranger licked Lily's hand as if to seal the moment with a blessing. That night, as the staff of Sunridge prepared dinner and the children gathered for bedtime, Ranger refused to leave Lily's side. Though he had technically been registered under Caleb's temporary custody, the staff allowed the dog to stay. He had a calming effect none of them could ignore. One counselor, a soft-spoken man named Thomas, with a sandy blonde hair and wireframe glasses, watched as Ranger followed Lily up to her shared room and laid down at the foot of her bed like a guardian made of fur and loyalty. "He doesn't even flinch at the hallway noise," Thomas noted. "It's like he knows he has one job only." Julie smiled. "He's not just a dog anymore. He's family." A week later, back at the station, Caleb received a call from the juvenile court officer. The paperwork was ready. Given Caleb's role in the case, Lily's strong emotional bond with him, and the dog's growing role as a therapy companion, the judge had approved temporary custody of both Lily and Ranger to Caleb Mason. When he drove to Sunridge that afternoon, the winter sun was already sinking. Inside, Lily waited by the lobby window, coat on, backpack ready. Ranger was beside her, tail thumping lazily on the floor. When she saw Caleb walk in, she ran to him without hesitation. "You're really taking me with you?" she asked, tears welling. Caleb knelt and opened his arms. "Only if you want to come home." Lily nodded fiercely, then buried her face into his coat. Ranger barked once, short and proud. That night, in Caleb's modest house on Sycamore Street, the living room glowed with warmth. Lily curled up on the couch with a new blanket, and Ranger snuggled at her feet. Caleb made hot chocolate, fumbling with the marshmallows, but smiling more than he had in years. The house, once silent, now held laughter and the soft sounds of belonging. And though the road ahead would still carry pain and healing, something had changed. The lie was gone and love had taken root. Snow fell gently on Clearwater that morning, dusting the rooftops and tree branches like powdered sugar. The courthouse stood tall and austere against the gray sky, but inside the air felt charged with quiet hope. Caleb Mason sat in the front row of the courtroom, dressed in his Navy sheriff's uniform, posture upright but heart-pounding. Beside him sat Lily Thompson, bundled in a red pica coat, her small hand gripping his tightly. At her feet, Ranger lay calmly, his sable and black coat freshly brushed, ears perked forward with alert dignity. Across the aisle, Mark Dawson sat flanked by two public defenders, unshaven, hollow-eyed, his once arrogant posture deflated under the weight of undeniable evidence. The judge, a composed woman in her 60s named Eleanor Whitaker, reviewed the final documents with solemn clarity. In light of the overwhelming evidence of abuse, fraud, and criminal negligence, she announced, her voice echoing through the chamber, this court hereby terminates all guardianship rights of Mr. Dawson over Lily Thompson. Furthermore, an investigation into the broader criminal network involving counterfeit pharmaceuticals is now officially open. Lily squeezed Caleb's hand tighter. The nightmare was finally over. Judge Whittaker turned toward Caleb. Officer Mason, due to your exemplary service, your prior relationship with the child, and your role in her recovery, this court grants you temporary guardianship of Lily Thompson. A permanent adoption hearing will follow upon completion of the standard review period. Caleb felt a lump rise in his throat. He nodded, his voice firm but warm. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside, the snow had thickened. Julie Parker met them at the courthouse steps, a clipboard tucked under one arm. She beamed as Lily threw her arms around Caleb's waist. I knew she'd choose you, Julie whispered. You're the one she trusts. Back at Caleb's apartment, a modest two-bedroom place on Sycamore Street, the change was already visible. The living room walls now bore a framed photo of Lily and Ranger at the park. Her missing teeth bared in a wide grin as Ranger licked her cheek. A crayon drawing had been carefully taped above the fireplace. 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, and one with big floppy ears. Each figure held hands. Rare's paw was drawn like a mitten. Ranger had adapted quickly. No longer just a rescue or therapy dog, he'd been officially registered as an honorary K-9 officer of Clearwater Police Department. Deputy Harris, who had helped with the field arrest, had advocated for it during a department meeting. That shepherd has instincts no training can teach. Harris had said he deserves a badge. A small ceremony followed. Ranger had been fitted with a custom vest that read K-9 Honorary Unit, and Lily had pinned a toy badge onto it with great care. The entire precinct had clapped as Ranger gave a small bark of approval. Each morning now, Lily walked Ranger to school, his leash slack, his head held high. The kids at the school bus stop had grown used to him. He even wore Air-Ed bandana with her name stitched in one corner. In the afternoons, they would head to Cedarwood Park, where Lily tossed a frisbee and Ranger leapt gracefully to catch it. His energy returned, his trust in the world slowly healing. At home, Caleb cooked dinner while Lily set the table. They had developed a quiet rhythm. Meatloaf Mondays, pasta Wednesdays, pancake Saturdays. Ranger, of course, had his own bowl with his name engraved. One chilly night just before Christmas, they sat together around the fireplace. Caleb was reclined in an armchair reading an old field report. Lily lay belly down on the rug, tongue between her teeth as she sketched in her notebook. Ranger dozed beside her, tail thumping softly in his sleep. Can I show you something? Lily asked. Caleb looked up. Of course. She held up a new drawing. It was a cozy little house with a chimney, snowy trees, and 3 figures standing in front. The same trio, a man, a girl, and a big dog with a tail that curled up like a question mark. She tapped the page. This is our new home, and this is us. Caleb reached for the drawing and studied it closely. The house had little hearts above the windows, and the man had a sheriff's badge. The dog wore a vest. The girl had wild curls and a big smile. It's perfect, he said. Ranger stirred, stretched, then settled his head back onto Lily's feet. She giggled and leaned against him. Caleb placed the drawing carefully on the mantel beside a new photo of the 3 of them at the precinct Christmas party. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Clearwater in silence. But inside, laughter echoed softly, joined by the quiet crackle of firewood and the steady breathing of a dog who had once been lost. And for the first time in years, Caleb Mason no longer felt alone. Sometimes family is not defined by blood, but by love, protection, and second chances. Caleb was just a man doing his duty. Lily was just a girl with no voice left to cry. And Ranger was just a dog clinging to what remained of loyalty. But when God writes a story, he weaves strangers into miracles. This tale reminds us that even in our darkest hours, God sends someone or something tossed in the gap. A child's whisper, a dog's loyalty, a man's decision to care. These are the fingerprints of heaven. If you believe miracles still happen and that love can rebuild what evil tried to destroy, then type Amen in the comments. May God bless everyone watching this video. Share this story if it touched your heart. Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, life-changing stories that remind us hope is never lost.